So for those of you that don't know me, I am just a grad teacher, and I am up here with my esteemed panelists. We all work for GE Healthcare. I know many of you from my role as an HTM development leader, so helping your organizations grow and drive efficiency and whatnot. Today, we will do some introductions, and then we're going to dive right in. What I would ask is, we don't want this to be as much of a presentation as we do a conversation, right? We all get sick of listening to each other talk. It's not fun when you're sitting there staring at us. So please ask questions, engage, don't heckle, and please feedback. Feedback is always welcome. So let's just go down in line. We don't have to go by the PowerPoint, but why don't we just go down in line here?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Melissa Priestley at GE Healthcare for about 10 years now. I work in service. I also transitioning into patient monitoring role. So been in the life care solutions business for a couple of years now.
I'm Emily Patterson. I'm a service account manager here in the state of Wisconsin, and then I also cover the Upper Peninsula. So some of you are definitely familiar in the room. I've worked with you on all things service contract related and your HTM program. Oftentimes, it's Jesse and myself together throughout the state working on some of the accounts. We'd love to meet some of you afterwards, those of you who I don't recognize.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Goot. So I lead the North Central region. Just moved out here north of the Chicago area. So about 2 weeks moved out of Philadelphia, born and raised in Cleveland, but excited to be here today and to meet a lot of you. So for the chat.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna Bousquet Johnson. I actually live in Delafield, so just west of here, and I cover ultrasound out of Chicago, and I've been with GE, I hate to say it, just over 20 years. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys about inclusiveness and diversity.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dana Heitman, and I am our Market Vice President of our North Central area, and recently transitioning from covering our life care solutions groups and patient monitoring, anesthesia, and diagnostic cardiology, and now we'll be working with and collaborating across all of the segments that we have at GE Healthcare supporting our Midwest customers. Excited to be here with you today.
Quick sound check. Can you guys hear us in the back of the room? Yep.
Two thumbs up.
Perfect. All right, so let's jump right in.
Yeah, so as we think about the journey that we at GE Healthcare are taking, and probably many of you in your organizations are taking through diversity and inclusion, certainly last year was an experience for all of us. And I know that as I seek to understand more and learn about these topics so that I can be an advocate amongst my peers, amongst my team, supporting inclusion, seeking more diverse candidacy within our organization, I sought to learn from other resources outside of our organization. And there's several that I have turned to. What you see up there, Jennifer Brown, she writes books, she leads webinars and panels, she's a national speaker on this topic. I think that she has opened my eyes to other resources that we can leverage to learn. How to Be an Inclusive Leader is a book that I would highly recommend that anyone take a peek at. She provides additional resources in there. What I would say, a couple of key points I want to share with you as we kick off our session today and talk about empowering all of us on this important topic. Becoming an inclusive leader doesn't mean that you're a leader of people or that you're an executive within an organization. And her point, which is extremely important for all of us to remember, is if we rely solely on the executives of an organization, any organization, to drive the change alone, it will never happen. And this is a journey that we all are on and are accountable for in supporting one another. And I think it speaks to making sure that everybody in our organization has a voice and that we're bringing diversity into the thought process and into the conversation. So as I think about why people might avoid this type of a conversation with our peers or in the workplace, fear. It's easy to not have the conversation. It's easy to simply focus on our priorities of the day, focus on numbers, for example, or how many patients we're serving without thinking about how are we serving them and making everybody feel included in that conversation and in that dialogue. And there's fear in starting the conversation that you might not have all of the answers. what if a colleague of mine questions me or challenges me, and I don't know the right thing to say or the right approach to answer them by? Could they feel like I'm ignorant and think that I don't know what I'm talking about or that I don't care? All of those are real possibilities, and I think we just need to be aware that nobody is all the answers. And by being vulnerable and being willing to enter into those conversations helps us empower those around us and lets everybody know that we have empathy and that we recognize that diversion and inclusivity is a justice issue in our workplace, and we all are driving for that. I would add that throughout last year, as we saw more social movements gain momentum, there was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to look to our diverse peers and say, help us understand. What's your take on what's happening in Minnesota? What's your take on what you're seeing with police officers? Or for women, what's your take on women moving up in leadership? So we have a tendency to look to our diverse colleagues and ask them to take ownership for an entire population in an unfair way. Yes, we should engage in those conversations, but not to put the weight of the world on their shoulders and expect them to be able to share with us, educate us on every facet. And that comes to owning the journey right along with them and being an ally to engage in a bi-directional conversation. It's not just about adding diversity for the sake of adding diversity. I'll share with you a couple numbers, and I'm going to refer to my notes to make sure that I get them correct. It is a business imperative for all of us. 33%, when you have diversity, you have 33% more likelihood to have above average profits. You are 45% more likely to have innovation revenue, 47% more likely to attract employees, 5.4 times more likely to retain employees, and 70% more likely to enter into a new market. There have been surveys done pulling together diverse groups, counterpoint to groups that look and come from the same background. And when interviews are done after collaborative efforts with those two different groups, the groups that are the same say, oh, it was an easy process. We came to joint decisions very quickly. We didn't really have confrontation. We came to our decision we feel really, really good about. When you ask the other group who has much more diversity in the conversation, they say it was hard. It was painful at times. I didn't always know that we were going to get to an end state. I didn't know what to do. It felt ambiguous. But when they took those projects and looked at long-term success, the long-term success came from the diversity. And so while it may be harder, the benefits are tenfold. And that's what we need to continue to focus on. So before I pass to my colleague Jessie, I'll just leave you with, of the baby boomer generation we see in the workforce, about 77% are Caucasian. Newer generations coming into the workforce, millennials and the generations coming behind them, are about 56% Caucasian. There is a tidal wave of new talent entering the marketplace and entering the workforce that are hungry and will demand to be included in the conversation and demand an inclusive and diverse workplace. And I'm excited for the journey that we have at GE and excited for the conversation with all of you today.
Awesome. Thank you. So just to ground us, there's really 4 phases of this continuum that we look at. So there's the unaware, and I think a lot of us, I personally would say a year ago, I would raise my hand and say unaware. So this is just an initiative. It's a check the box. I don't have to do this. It's very low risk. It doesn't feel like you're exposing yourself. And I think it was the norm. We've learned in the last 18 months that can't be the norm. So now we're in this, I would say a lot of us are in this phase 2, this aware phase. So we're learning, we're starting to understand, but we're still practicing, right? So I think about myself, and I could look at this panel here, and frankly, we all look the same, right? I mean, there's not a lot of difference here. So you could say there's no diversity, but you have to look below that as well, because I can look at each one of my colleagues here, and knowing them personally the way I do, they have very different perspectives on things because of what they've grown up with, whether it's mental health issues, or they have children with disabilities, or they've lost loved ones unexpectedly. And that really changes who you are. And you can't see that from looking at somebody's face. And so you have to always kind of be aware of what's going on and embrace what their experience is that helps to drive their thought process, which will drive including their thoughts and their emotions and their feelings. So that you're in those first two phases, and I personally think you kind of can bounce around between these phases. Truly, like whether you're at home or whether you're with your family, I again at work I feel like I'm far more aware of these things, but when I'm with my family, maybe I fall back into old habits or old thought processes. So it's a practice. You have to practice that muscle. You move into phase 3, and this is active. And I think a lot of us are in this phase right now. So we're actively trying to understand. We're actively trying to learn. We're actively trying to educate each other. We're trying to educate those around us. But again, it's practice. And it feels a little uncomfortable. So I'm going to share a conversation you and I had this morning. We had talked about, can we talk about BLM or the Me Too movement? Because it can get uncomfortable and it can feel exposed. And I said, you know what, we're sitting here talking about this and we're talking about can we or can't we do it? And so we have to. We have to be able to do this because this is how discussions happen. This is how we evolve. This is how we become inclusive and become diverse. And from there, you move into the last phase, which is being an advocate. So not just actively doing something, but actively advocating for someone, actively making sure you're treating someone equal. And when I look at equal, it doesn't mean everybody in here gets, I'm using last night's example, everybody in here gets 2 drink food pots, right? We all may not need 2 drink pots. Maybe somebody needs 1, maybe somebody needs none, maybe somebody needs 3.
Who's your point?
So, it should be based on person, not based on equal, because it appears equal, but based on what that person needs to feel equal. So advocating, exposing yourself, taking that high risk position and feeling uncomfortable with it. I mean, we've all been around the industry a long time. Uncomfortableness makes you grow. If you stay status quo, you're not going to change, right? It's the same thing every day. You have to be uncomfortable. You have to fumble. You have to learn, and that way you can progress. So high level, those are the 4 phases. We're going to now go into each one of these phases a little bit deeper. So I am going to hand it over to you.
So, and if you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free
I will
to
actually
speak up.
want
Yeah,
to,
please.
just you were talking about having uncomfortable conversations. If you know the people, it's a little bit easier to do that. If you don't know the people and you don't know how their emotional state is, or because that's what's happening. I feel in this worldwide things that are going on right now. It gets so emotional so fast that is probably why a lot of them stay in the unaware stature
Yeah,
or state.
I would agree 100%, but I think it's our job to talk about it and to bring the emotion out.
Can you give an example? Because sometimes that helps.
I mean, just anything. I mean, social media is I think is going to be demise of America or the world.
Yeah.
I just think, and people hide behind things very easily do that. I'm on a keyboard and nobody's never going to know who wrote this.
Right.
So that's one example. But just having these conversations, you mentioned BLM or Me Too. There's so much emotion on both sides of that conversation that as soon as it's even difficult to even approach the subject because everybody goes into their corner and starts, okay, I'm defending now. And it's hard to get past that.
So let me hit on the unaware piece for a second. So what you're hitting on is it's just naturally ingrained. You talked about this is how you've been raised, this is what you grow up with. We're not born with a belief system that's loaded into a hard drive in your brain. Like you get this belief system, you get that. It's learned and ingrained over the course of time. It takes a long time for that to become very like habitual or ingrained. So I always look at it and say the unaware piece is no different than if we stand up here and I was presenting to you on a topic and I said every third word, and somebody pulled me aside, you know you say a lot. No, I don't. I don't. I'm completely unaware because it's so ingrained in how I act every single day. I'm completely blind to it. So what we have to encourage is that you have to put the guards down and seek to understand, right? So you might have said seek to understand. So seek to understand perspective. The person may not be here to try to change you from where you stand to where you are, but make you more aware so you're given a choice. You can make a decision and maybe learn from that. So that piece, there's not one person in here who has 100% awareness of anything out there. So I appreciate you speaking up on that.
I'll give an example. We had the opportunity. There's a couple of local speakers in Wisconsin. They run a company called Flying Elephant, I think. Justin Ponder and Deanna Singh, and they've spoken with us at GE a number of times. And they're a really fun couple, really educational. Highly recommend checking them out. And an example he gave, and it somewhat ties in, but it really resounded. When a colleague, maybe you don't know a colleague very well, and they've been gone from work for a period of time, and they come back and ask, oh gosh, I noticed you were gone on vacation. No, my aunt passed away. I'm sorry to hear that. She passed away from cancer. She battled it for a long time. In no point would any of us say, well, did she eat lettuce? Was she at a healthy diet? Was she exercising? No, none of us would do that. We would just say, oh my gosh, I'm very sorry for your loss. That's tragic and we're sad. We're not going to look for reasons. We're not going to look to blame. And I think that I think about that as we enter those difficult conversations. And you're right, not everyone's coming from it from that perspective. And so you're entering unknown and uncharted territory. And it's okay to say, I don't know that this conversation is going to be productive. Perhaps we can talk another time because I do value your opinion. I do value what you have to say. I also want it to be constructive. And I think that as human beings, we have a nature of trying to help find the reason why and the what caused it. And we're quick to give our opinion of the what caused it. It's like when you're a parent and everyone's like, do this with your baby, but don't do this. We're quick to give our opinion and our advice. I think when we take the perspective of, we don't know the circumstances always, let's leave our opinions maybe to the side and just talk and understand and not make those assumptions. Well, she probably got cancer because she wasn't eating healthy and not exercising. So I always think about that as frame of reference. And it's also okay to say, this conversation's getting a bit too much and it's probably better if we just table it.
I think in the unaware stage, we have to do more listening. We're quick to talk too much. We're quick to react. And Dan, you had a really great point, a good example is we have to listen, do our own research. We can't always rely on other people to give us that information. And we're very fortunate at GE. We have a lot of great programs to help educate us on the movements that are going on with BLM, with Me Too, with LGBTQ, which is great, but we also have to do our own homework. We can't expect other people to feed us that information. And once we do that and we have an understanding of what is going on in society, historical background, and how this has influenced people, that helps us then build compassion and empathy and have a more open mind. We're very quick to make assumptions, right, and pass judgments. I think we all do that, maybe unconsciously, and we don't know. But I think once we develop more of this understanding and do our own homework on it, and then also from a working perspective, I think about my field engineers that I used to manage the service team for North Central and North Star Territory. I think so much of getting to know them on a personal level, understanding their background, where they come from, what are some of their challenges, really helped reframe, how am I talking to them? How am I addressing the team? Am I saying something that could be offensive, to the group? You really start to think about how to better and properly communicate. I think that's important. So bridging that gap from unaware to aware really requires a lot of listening and taking a step back, reflecting on yourself, and reflecting on the team and the people you work with, and stepping out of that comfort zone. We're going to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. That's where we become vulnerable and have a more personal connection with folks.
Do you have an example of where you recognize this and what you've done to change?
Yeah, so I have a personal example and then a professional one. So from a personal perspective, I live in Lake Mills. I do a lot of volunteer work for our public school system. And when there was a lot going around we need to advocate for our public schools, around education and funding, I started to realize that we don't have a very diverse school system in Lake Mills. I wanted to have a deeper understanding of segregation in schools. I wanted to better understand the history behind our school systems. So I started to do a lot of research. I listened to a lot of podcasts. There's one called Nice White Parents, which, as uncomfortable as it sounds, it was very eye-opening to listen to this podcast about how school systems public schools started, how charter schools started, how private schools started, how that has impacted society today, and how we have moved from cities to suburbs, etc. And doing that research myself helped me understand how to better represent my public school system and how to better integrate with the Madison school system and lobby and help my community more. So from a personal perspective, I'm still on that journey. I don't think I'm in aware yet. I think I'm still doing my research to better support my community and better understand. And then from a professional perspective, when I led the field engineers early on, I only had 2 women on my team. And getting to know the team, spending time with them, I found that they were lacking camaraderie. They kind of felt left out. They felt like they didn't necessarily have a good companionship with the group. And I wanted to have a more inclusive team of engineers. So I worked with HR to really understand what is our recruiting policy, how do we work to bring more folks in, people who have a background, who have the right skill sets, but really open it up. Are we recruiting with all the technical colleges? How do we make sure we have a good candidate slate? And so right before the pandemic hit, we actually had an open role, and we had a huge slate. We dwindled it down, and I was able to find a really awesome candidate for the team. And she was a female, and she's great. She was based in Minnesota, which was wonderful, but it helped us kind of change. It's not like I was looking for a woman to join the team, but it helped us really reflect on how are we getting candidates? What does our candidate slate look like? What is the criteria we're going after? How do we make sure we're attracting people into our organization and doing our due justice to make sure that we're picking the right person for the job and not leaving anyone out who could be qualified. So it's probably long-winded, and I apologize.
You're up next time.
Yeah, I think you have a question for me on phase 2.
I do.
So,
So,
yeah, I got a question here.
Okay. Can you share how you were not aware of your own biases? And how did you challenge yourself to change that?
Yeah, so Jessie let me know that she was going to ask me that question. And I've spoken in front of groups before, but this one, there was a lot of anticipation for, I think, several of us, just given the topic, wanting to do it justice. Coming to this session with all of you today in a humble fashion, knowing that there are voices in the room that are missing, right? There's representation that's not here. So as I reflected on this, thought about some of my biases or unconscious biases, it was emotional for a few days because when you reflect on it and that floodgate starts to open, there's a lot there. There's so much there that I could potentially talk about. And what I decided to do was talk about something personal to me. And I think something that was really a pivotal moment for me. So I started at GE a little over 5 years ago, and every new commercial hire goes through a week-long training with other commercial new hires. So, you know, at the time I considered myself a little lower on the totem pole, but then there are people in the commercial organization who are much higher up. You've got this spread of various people from different backgrounds coming in. And I tend to be on the more quiet side, so we were 3 days in, and there was someone in the class who I noticed had a sense of humor, seemed like very, you know, person that people just are attracted to in the group, like can kind of captivate people. And we were walking down the hallway during one of our breaks to grab some water, and I happened to be walking alongside her, and she started talking to me and sharing some personal things, and said she had a daughter at home and she was using, you know, we've got a daughter at home. She's, I think at the time, 8 years old. Continued to talk, and then in the same conversation, I don't know how we got there, but she mentioned that they had gotten married 2 years prior. And me being a little more on the quiet side and trying to fit in and infuse a little bit of humor, which I should never try to do because I don't consider myself a funny person, but I made a comment without thinking, and I just said, so you reverse ordered, you had the child first and then you got married. Wasn't funny. I don't know why I said it, wasn't thinking, but it was the first thing that came to mind, and she gave me a very candid and kudos to her confident response, and she said, well, in my state legally, we were not able to get married until 2 years ago. And then take a step further, my heart completely sunk because I identify as gay as well. And if anyone in the room should have been able to approach that conversation in the right fashion and provide her an opportunity to be herself, if not say something like that, it should have been me. And that was a big moment for me in realizing that, like you said earlier, these things are just ingrained in us. We're socialized from the day we're born. And my entire life, that is the world I grew up in. So without thinking, that unconscious bias came out, and I just assumed. And the point of this story is really 5+ years later, that person is still with GE, and it's one of the people leaders at GE that I most look up to. We've stayed close, and what she provided me was an opportunity to really develop a strong relationship with a peer, a colleague, a leader within the business, and provided me the opportunity to be my authentic self as well. I'm certainly not perfect. There's a lot of biases and unconscious biases that are still there, but I do agree with what you said earlier. And I think that you can bounce around within these spaces. So even though, Melissa, you acknowledge, I feel like I'm still in the unaware phase, I do think in many ways I have become more aware by having conversations with family, friends, surrounding myself with community and people who I feel like also want to be part of that conversation in a productive fashion, because I acknowledge, like, it definitely feels like sometimes you walk into a situation where those things come up and words start flying and it's not productive. So at the end of the day, still trying to get past that unaware stage in some places, but in other areas where I am more aware, I feel like I can get into stage 3 and 4, right, where you're being more active and you're being more of an advocate. And GE has provided that opportunity for me. And I mean, just one example being the efforts around inclusion and diversity. I'm on the North Central Region Inclusion and Diversity Council. Do I consider myself a subject matter expert? No. Do I consider myself someone who understands all their own biases and understands how to have these conversations? Absolutely no. But that's one of the reasons I'm part of it. It's because I want to be more aware. I want to have the opportunity to learn more, and I want to be part of the solution and someone who at the end of the day in 10, 15, 20 years can look back and say, we did this together.
I love that. And I know that was hard. So thank you for sharing. What I would say is, I don't even think you recognize the impact you have. So you guys know I spend a lot of time on the road, like days in the car at a time. And when Emily first started, Emily and I spent days in the car at a time. And you just start talking and you learn. And Emily shared this with me, and she shared a lot of other things with me. And it was just two people having a conversation. And there was no getting out of the car. We were minutes away, right? She could say whatever she wanted, but we were stuck together. But it makes me look at everything very differently, just based on the personal conversations we had. So I think, people always feel like they have to pick sides. They don't have to pick sides. You just have to understand.
I think they're uneducated.
They're uneducated.
So I think, like to one of your points, you're not doing your own research. You only hear what you want to hear. You never listen to the other side. Then you don't know the other side.
Right. Exactly.
I just want to add, we spent, yes, ample hours in the car together, but going back to the topic here of being an inclusive leader, you don't have to be a leader within your organization. You're here to be an inclusive leader, right? And when I started in my role and I spent all those hours in the car with Jessie, she provided me that opportunity. She was empathetic. She provided that listening ear, and she truly did want to know everything about me. She knows I've been in a relationship with Jennifer for over 7 years. And the fact that we get on the call and we're working through something and she asked, how does Jenna like her new job? Our working relationship, we accomplish so much together and get so many great things done that you're missing out if you're not developing those types of relationships.
All right. Let's move to phase 3. Miss Anna.
So active. So I have a lot of diversity in my life, both personally and professionally. And I actively seek it out because I think it makes me a better person and a better leader, a people leader and a leader personally and professionally. So I personally, I do volunteer work, and I've also been a foster parent for many years. We've adopted 2 children through foster care here in Milwaukee. And we also started a chapter of Blessings and Back Talk. Done a lot of stuff through that as well. And so we actively have thought out diversity in our lives because I think that has allowed us to find ways to not only bring a lot into our families' lives and made us more richer that way, but it's also made us help to bring more to our children that maybe we couldn't because we have children that are different from us. And as we brought up these children, I realized that I also have a responsibility not only to them, but I feel to the rest of the world as well. So, and doing that through my professional career, I've sought that out as well. And so I've done things through our ERGs at our company, and I've sought mentorship programs and things like that. But as Jessie was saying before, I think diversity isn't just what you can see with your eyes, but I think it goes deeper than that. And one thing that I think in particular that's really taught me through, especially foster care, is that you never know people's stories. And a lot of times, like we make these judgments about people because we don't know what their stories are, especially as I see my middle child who has a lot of disabilities that if you look at her, you wouldn't be able to see, she might have a moment. And I've seen a lot of times where people have gone, oh my God, and I'm like, hey, no problem. If you have an idea, come on over and tell me, no problem at all. And people will stop and they'll be taken aback. But, hey, I'm open to whatever somebody has to say. But, that's really taught me a lot because many times when people are dealing with something, like I said, especially in foster care, and we make a blanket judgment about somebody, and if you take a minute to just have a conversation with somebody and say, hey, I might not understand what's going on, but is there something that I can do to help? And sometimes people will say, no, there's nothing you can do to help, but just listen. That makes all the difference. Or sometimes they'll be like, yeah, actually, how about if you take this off my plate and you do that? You know, just asking somebody every once in a while, being active like that really makes a difference. And it might not make a difference in that very moment, but later down the road, somebody will come back to you later on and they'll say, you know, that time I was really angry in that moment and I couldn't tell you right then, but that did really help me. And so just realize, like, it might really bother you and you might get angry too because that person is lashing out and they're going through something right now. Remember, it's not about you. They have a lot of stuff that's going on and it's way bigger than you, than me, than probably all of the stuff that's going on out there. And we can't take it personally. So just kind of let it go. You know, that saying, like, duck off a water's back, water off a duck's back. I messed that one up. Water off a duck's back. Like, try to remember that because it's really what it's all about. And if we can be active in that moment and try and, like, not let it get to us, it will make a difference, like one little step at a time.
All right. Jen?
Look at me. So,
And let me just say, we purposely took this slide and gave it to Jim because I would say I've known Jim for 19 years.
19 months.
Here's aging both of ourselves. And I've known Jim in a lot of different capacities, from colleagues to leaders to not talking for years. But the one thing that always sticks out in my mind is Jim has always been an advocate. And it goes well beyond just the last 18 months. This is always something that I have seen it. So I'm just kissing your ass.
No, you're not. You never. So I thought you put me here because I could talk forever in general, but about this, I'm extremely. I know I'm extremely. 5 minutes is really going fast. I'm coming at this entirely different angle now than what I had thought about before. The hard aspect, right? I want to jump down to the bottom. This is hard. So you personally have to commit to the why behind it. And so I heard a number of things that they throw out here. In general, life is moving fast. So I want to go back to your experience. And thanks for sharing, because that's freaking awesome that you shared that. It's moving fast. Things are happening, and you're reacting to the situation at hand. You talked about everybody's being funny. We naturally want to blend in and be a part of a group. Nobody wants to be the person who's way off to the side and feels different. Nobody does. But in instances, we don't recognize when they are that person who's in the room who is different and unique, and don't pull them in. So while you were trying your best to blend in, you made a mistake. But the beauty is that you've been forgiven, right? And we got to remember that is a huge part. We are humans. We make mistakes. It's going to happen. So this part here is extremely difficult in general because, one, people have a fixed belief system. It is ingrained. It is who they are. And quite frankly, it's going to take a long time to change. And when we talk about, what do we want to be? We have a diversity council in our North Central region I'm a part of. And I asked this question 2 days ago. There's 2 people who share it for us. And I said, all right, can we slow down? What does success look like in all this? Let's just define success. Because I bet you if I asked everybody here, we'd have some different definition of success. And the both of them said, we have to, from a numbers standpoint, we have to look like the customers we represent, the cities and countries in which we live in, et cetera. I said, okay, fantastic. So you're making it based upon numbers metric. What if I waved the magic wand or put an initiative in place? I said, we're going to go hire X number of diverse candidates. We're going to have X number of females. We're going to have this in terms of, whatever, religion, sexual preference. We will go hire for that. Perfect, done, tomorrow. Game over, we move on. I said, is that success? The answer is absolutely not. It'd be more broken, quite frankly, in my opinion. While it would look like a great representation of diversity, we've checked the box in terms of just numbers, but we've done nothing to change our beliefs, thought system in driving inclusive and connectivity, and quite frankly, a sense of belonging as a team. And so on this front, around figuring out who's included, excluded piece, it's just got to be a part of who you are and what you want to be, right? I mean, for me, I want it. There's a ton of reasons. I won't get into why me personally this is so important, but I want to make sure that everybody has the proverbial seat at the table. Who's out there? When you think about the hiring practices so that we have diverse representation, inclusivity, male-female mix, that starts beyond hiring. What are you doing to put a lending hand out to ensure that you're helping to develop and pull those folks in? And that's probably what you're identifying to me. I will be that person who goes over and finds the person who's over there. You kind of pick them out. I want to go talk to the person who's talking to nobody. That's just who I am. It's kind of weird, but that's how I roll. The educate your colleagues and contacts. I think this in general for me, mentorship is huge. And what I will hit on, mentorship people I believe is viewed as, you're in a position higher than mine, you know more than me, so you're going to teach me. And if that's the approach at which you're coming at it as a mentor, you're way, way, way off base. If you're not coming into this into a 50-50 expectation around, listen, I'm going to help you learn some stuff, you're going to help me learn some stuff together, we're going to teach each other, you're starting out of the gate wrong. As somebody who's being mentored, so one of our ERG groups had asked me to come in because I was mentoring an individual from our company. He was talking about how much this has changed to kind of more guidance and learning together, and said there's other folks who are in our group who, quite frankly, haven't talked to their mentors yet, or it's very sporadic at best. And I got on, and I got a couple calls afterwards. They recorded the session, and I said, I want to talk to everybody who raised their hand and signed up and said, I will be a mentor. I said, shame on you for not having called your mentees. Shame on you. Like, you should be embarrassed the fact that you raised your hand and you're not taking proactive action to get in touch with them. Two, to everybody who's on the call here today, I don't care if it's the president and CEO of the company, fire them if they're not meeting your needs. If they're not helping you get better and you're not helping them get better, fire them and find somebody new. And I think that's where you have to feel comfortable, like being you and coming out here. You know what? If they fire me because of something stupid like that, I don't want to be here. Like, you shouldn't want to be there. It's not a good place. So what I try to do is encourage folks to be your authentic self. And when you're not comfortable, make it aware, like kind of pull yourself in, because when you do, ultimately, I think you bring awareness to folks who quite frankly had no idea. They just quite frankly had zero clue that they were saying 1,000 times. So I appreciate you all including me. I could go on for hours and hours, but they will never invite me back. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Hey, so as we kind of wrap up, questions, comments, thoughts, and then I'm going to leave you with a few parting questions.
So I think one of the things that kind of touches, on some of your comments is, I think it's a natural defense mechanism where you may get defensive if it's uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable, but it doesn't give you the right, and I'll say, you don't have to agree with somebody's viewpoint, but it never gives you the right to be disrespectful to somebody, because you don't know that story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to disagree. It's okay not to like something. Ultimately, I think people lose sight of, when you're having that conversation, what is your ultimate goal? Is it just to spew out exactly how you feel and not hear anything of what the other person has to say, so that you're maybe dissecting your own thoughts and seeing, is that really truly how I feel, or is that just how I approach things, or experience things? So I think it's multifaceted. I'll go so far too as I struggle a little bit with that activate, advocate section, and I'll go there. I think recently in the last 18 months, a lot of companies have jumped on that initial bandwagon because they don't want to feel the backlash. But I don't know that they truly educated themselves as to what they're advocating for, right? I mean, it's okay not to jump on that bandwagon. You shouldn't feel the backlash. You should be doing it for the right reasons. That might take you some time. Just to your point, you go back and forth. I go back and forth. It's going to take some time. I don't want to be seen as not being genuine with what I'm asking or just to advocate.
Right.
You need to take the time. You need to respect that people are going to go through that process. So if I'm not like, right out of the gate, understand it's not because I'm not in agreement with you. I just need to educate myself so that I'm being genuine with what I'm asking.
I have to. I need
Go,
the money.
go.
So I sit in a really unique perspective. I agree. So am I doing it just because it's the thing to do so nobody
So
gets
were you before
right?
what was going on, right?
I agree.
Everybody brought it up or
Yeah.
called you out on a road.
I agree. I totally agree. It's either who you are all the time or who you not are. You're acting the part. So I've had the pleasure of working with Everett Cunningham, who's our CDO, right? So he's our president CEO of USCAN, US and Canada, for 15 months. He's still my boss today, but I was his chief of staff. I mean, I'm talking like glued to the side during COVID, chief of staff. I grew up in a very diverse area, so that's the credentialing piece. So I feel I have perspective. I still don't have perspective as an African-American man. I don't have that, but I got a lot more of it. So when you say that, where were you before? So he's a Black leader, right, in corporate America. And we are making that push. He's making that push, right? It's louder now than it was in the past. The ignorance that exists that's out there is it's eye-opening. I thought I saw a lot of stuff, but even when you push, it's not the majority. But when you have, in our Pride Month, you have Black History Month, you have fill in blank. There's messaging that comes out there. Some of the stuff that boomerangs back that they're employees of our organization that hit his personal email back would floor you. And it pisses me off that they work in our company. And so a big part of this is how do we get to these numbers to be the right spot? You're going to hire appropriately. You're going to develop appropriately. The key part, it doesn't change until you find those folks who don't have the belief systems that fit in the company, get them the heck out. That's important. So they shouldn't be there. And so that's equally as hard, sifting through the many good folks to find the few sour apples in there. Anyway, I could go on. It's.
And I assume when you make that comment, it's those people who really just have no desire to change their viewpoint. There are people who are going to be kind of stuck where they're at,
Right,
and
yeah.
if they're willing to go on that journey and open up their eyes, that's a different story, right? But those that are totally stuck where they're at, just like you're just not a fit.
So I hope it is the minority. It's not like there's hundreds of these coming back. It's the one or two. It's the second part is just the middle of the fact that we don't know what we don't know. We're blind. We are who we are. We grew up. That's our belief systems. And so I can't learn about each of you, what you've been through, about each of your diverse perspectives, unless I really seek to understand, spend some time, and open up myself and be vulnerable like you were. So anyway, all right, I'll shut up because I can go on for days.
I might add in defense of the I don't know, the average person that would be willing to change on the street. Part of it is access to the information.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll put myself into the unaware category, and until either A, you have to prove seek out information or perspectives, okay? Which, if you don't have a compelling reason, it's not going to get your career done.
Right.
And maybe there can be events that can be considered to be compelling reasons to seek out information. But it's hard to come up, again, unless you can find a forum or a friend or a family member or whatever, right? So Mayo has this really big diversity forum, and we're honestly Mayo Rochester is we have people working in every culture, all forms of right? And so kind of under the umbrella of access to information, they started having just like they would invite people to speak panels like this, except literally just every perspective you could think of. And they would talk about their experiences in their life, and more often than not, what they were really trying to challenge was that, hey, here in Rochester, Minnesota, you know, you guys have a problem too. You just aren't aware of it, right? Because here's what happens to you.
Right.
And then that compels you to find more information. But the counterpart of this is until, and this has been happening, I would say, in the last couple of years, right? But until our media sources catch up and be consistent with this, then it'll just fritter away every time. Anyway, I'm sorry, that was long-winded, but it's
I think
all
that,
access to information.
to your point, what it allows is it at least allows a forum for people to start talking about it, right? Some people are saying, no, it's so much, but at least some of the people that have had to deal with this for so long are now at least having the opportunity to start talking about what's been happening to that and feeling like, all right, and now it's okay for me to say, this has been going on for so long, and now at least I feel validated by the fact that I can say, you think that this is too much? Let me tell you about what I've had to deal with my whole life. And, you know, and I, like I said, I have 2 children that are African American, and the stuff that I've only had to deal with, like, within this last year, that I've had to go to the school principal and say, like, this is not okay. And it breaks my heart, but this is the stuff that we have to do. You know, so like, this is allowing at least for all of us to have a conversation now that maybe before people just had to deal with on their own, and now we know that this is able to have out in the open.
I just kind of wanted to challenge that belief system of, you know, you have to have like a person or a forum or a group or something or someone that has to be there to kind of guide you through that. Because honestly, you have the entire world at the tip of your fingertips. And so to me, hearing when people have, you know, those moments like, oh, I didn't know until I asked, totally understandable, totally get it. It's not, you know, your reality every day, so it's different. But I think just taking the time to, like you guys have reiterated over and over, educate yourself, Google it. Like Google, if you literally just Google how to be an ally of X, Y, Z, whatever, you know, you feel like that day. There's so many different avenues that you can do. There's books, there's YouTube, different big podcasts. So I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be like an active in-person situation that you have to go attend it or hear it. You can do stuff, I mean, on your account, I'm sure people can, you know, just kind of take the time to look it up and just hear the people's stories. And I think, you know, you all have had some very eye-opening experiences, and it, you know, just talking to my friends who haven't had the experiences that I have, they're very much floored by it. The world is a very different place depending on, you know, the shoe that you walk in.
So go ahead, please.
I always say, check your sources. So I have 2 teenagers, and I have a dad that's 72 years old, and they all think Facebook is a source. That is not accurate. Like, I told my stepmother, you need to take dad's Facebook privileges.
And email is not a source either, by the way.
Email is not a
If your
source.
friend
So
sends you, no, that's not a source.
There's no one data point. So that's why I have to go back to the educate piece. And so while, and so this is, I feel like now we're friends. So even how we should, like, hey, I would like to challenge you. Consider the alternative, right? So it's just words, like, so now it's psychology that gave me come out. The words that we use with this is a really touchy area. But so as a people leader, or even if you don't lead individuals, I often ask the question, so who's your personal board of directors? I always ask, who's your personal board of directors? And they rattle off. I'm like, looks like you, looks like you, looks like you, looks like you, looks like you. Like, so they tend to go to the comfort area, right? And that's who you're surrounded with. Challenge yourself. It's kind of what you're getting at. Challenge yourself to go seek this. You're going to have to be uncomfortable. You're going to ask some really funky questions. Just know that people want to talk about themselves. There's nothing people know better than themselves. And when you're genuine and seeking to understand in a way that is inviting, folks are going to love that. They're going to welcome it in. But here, my give or ask of you is go back and think, if you had to make a big life decision, new job, move, whatever, it's fill in the blank. Who would be the people you would call for some advice, personal and professional? And do you have diverse thought representation? That, again, diversity is not a color, skin color, gender. It's a host of stuff. Do you have different perspective in your life to help you see the total versus your lens? That's important. When you can see it all, we're getting places. But I gotta tell you, we all have a long way to go. We have a long way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for the engagement, the conversation. I'm gonna leave you with just a couple of questions. Read them, think about them, talk them out through yourselves, talk them out through each other. But just, I ask that, every day you just challenge yourself a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.